Good morning. May I know who are online at this moment? The panelists. Do we have Mr. BishowParajuli?
Yes, I am very much here. Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir. Murli here.
Hello. Good morning, Muraliji. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. And we have here with us Professor Jayaraman. And I just wanted to check whether Dr. Ramasubramanian and Velvizhi are around.
Yeah. Good
Yes,
morning.
I can see Ram.
Ramasubramanian.
Hi, good morning,
Thank
Ram.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Velvizhi.
Good morning, sir. I'm here.
Okay. I can't see you. Where are you? Okay. Okay. Dr. Surjit. Yes, I can see you.
Yeah,
good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Ms. Sonam Domre. Hi, good
Hi,
morning.
sir. Good morning. I'm here as well.
Good morning. Welcome all to panelists and various people who are online. And thank you for our invitation and being a part of this panel, and also many thanks for those who are online. And it actually, when I saw inaugural attendance, it was quite encouraging. It was over 3,500 people plus in other platforms. I don't know how it was. So if we were to have physically done it, I don't think we would have gathered that kind of presence. So this way it is much better in terms of reaching out. So thank you all for all the people who are as panelists and the others who are joined in as the listeners. I'm sure they are interacting with us later today. The topic today is climate change and resilient Tamil Nadu, although we are specifically looking at Tamil Nadu, but I invited Mr. BishowParajuli primarily because he will give us some kind of a overall perspective, not only within India, but also on the South Asian context, because he is also part of the WFP program in South Asia as well. So in this context, it is good to hear from him. The impacts of climate change, as we know, is very pervasive and inclusive of all sectors, various sectors. As we speak, I think there are many there are many places there is flooding, and the flooding happens in most unforeseen places. For example, in my own state, Karnataka, Hyderabad and various dry districts are otherwise equivalent to the desert districts are not really receiving rainfall, and in the last 3 to 4 years they have been getting flooded. So this is one such are attributed to be climate change. And of course we are looking at various other things, frequent floods, primarily because of extreme environmental events, sea level rise and glacier melts. I think this is something which we have been experiencing by and large. There are other unexplained various events that happens locally, which perhaps at a global level or even at the regional we don't know. And you as workers at the very local level, you will be able to understand and send us that kind of signals where climate change is impacting in very different ways than we expect at the global level. I think this kind of discussion helps us to understand what other things can happen because of climate change. So we are here to address some of those issues regionally as well as nationally and locally. And we have a galaxy of people. I see lots of interest and lots of experience and expertise in this area. So without much ado, I would rather go to Mr. Parajuli and request him to speak about impact of climate on food security, agriculture, food security and agriculture, regional perspectives, and need for regional approach. I think what better person than we have than Mr. Parajuli. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, Muraliji, and also your co-host, Ramasubramanian ji. I want to first pay my respect to Professor Swaminathan and want to really share our gratitude for this legend scientist who has really helped to transform India's agricultural sector, but not only India, going beyond, and is a very, very good friend of the United Nations World Food Program. So I'm really honored to be here to share some ideas and thoughts. Maybe we should have the other mic muted so that we have a less noise, if I may request that. And I want to really also thank you for inviting me to this very important event of the year, and I'm very honored to be here. You know, I bring a journey of 40 years back to India. I've been 35 years with the UN system in 11 countries. I did my agriculture studies and rural development, and I was here in the 70s. So I have seen from that 40 years and, you know, a couple of decades before that. So I would talk on 4 points, basically. The first point would be about food security and global regional element. And also then I will talk about climate change, its impact on food and nutrition security. And I'll talk about situation in Southeast Asia and in India. And then I will talk about way forward and the regional approach. Just to be more provocative and sort of bringing few highlights given the little time we have. Moving to the first issue of food security and global perspective. I mean, the good news in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years has been, there's been so much advancement in science and agriculture, you know, starting from Green Revolution in India and huge improvement and surplus in food production. So that is a fantastic news for humanity and everything. And there is also good surplus amount. If we look at India alone, in the last 50, 60 years, India from food deficit, it has become a food surplus country, like reaching to 291 million tons this year, a surplus of 75, 80 million tons. I mean, really a record achievement, and big tribute to agriculture universities, research institutions like yours and many others, agri-scientists, farmers, and the right type of policies and perspective in place. But a bit of the sad news and dichotomy here is also we have globally about 690 million people hungry and not getting enough food in spite of this surplus and stocks and etc. And people sleeping without full stomach. That is a big worry. And out of this 690 million, over half of the population are in Asia, and quite a significant number in India itself. So that's a challenge. And there are great examples, and I will share it later, how this is being addressed and how it can improve further going forward. And also to point out the latest SOFI report, which was issued by 3 realm-based agencies, bring out and share a concern that in the last 4 or 5 years, 10 million people are added to the list of hunger population every year. So reaching to 60 million in the last 5 years. So this is a worry. And then the further thing is this biggest concern in the century which has happened is the COVID pandemic, and that has caused a lot of havoc and challenge to food security, food security and livelihood, and so this is the challenge we are facing, and the World Food Program is predicting this year, because of the COVID in 2021, the acute food insecure population is likely to rise to double from the previous year to close to 270 million. And also the biggest concern here is also the child hunger and the rising challenge and vulnerability among the poorer sector of the population, etc. And already there is a concern that 60% of the children death, which is happening in some of the developing world, occurs or attributed to malnutrition and food insecurity. So therefore, if we have that concern, there is that we're going to be facing this mortality among children and our new generation. So and I want to stress one point, obviously, in the context of this supply and demand and the challenges. Of course, food system experts and practitioners, we know this is the mere availability of food supply is not enough to address hunger and doesn't really addresses the food insecurity. So the crucial aspect of that is affordability, adequate nutritional availability, and the livelihood part of it. So this is the context we are living in this world and in this region. Now, going back and then looking a little bit deeper into the climate change impact on agriculture and food and nutrition security. Of course, I think as you touched on it briefly, Muraliji, climate change can act as the high-risk multiplier, exacerbating drivers of food security. The climate change decreases crop production, climate change changes frequency and intensity of climate-related hazards, can result in more humanitarian and food security crisis. I mean, this has been evident around the world and in this region as well. And it is anticipated and estimated, in fact, the impact of climate change are becoming more and more visible, and some sectors are more intensely affected than others. In fact, we have seen in the last few months itself in India, the floods in West Bengal, the cyclone in Orissa, and also Kerala, the flooding and etc. Just before coming to India, I was 5 years in Zimbabwe, heading the United Nations system, and have witnessed there in the 5 years, 3 years of cyclical drought. That country at one stage was food secure, a surplus, a producer of food. Of course, there is also the economic mismanagement and etc. But a major factor remain among the marginal farmers. Small farmer is the drought. Now, 50% of the population are depending on external help and food aid. So this repeated concern of El Nino and La Nina, these weather and climate concern are part of the climate change concern. And the issue affecting climate change is the, of course, pointing out to breaking down on a concern is the availability of food because of the drought and or flood or disruption in agriculture, and then changes in the yield because of the situation, and then also changes in the quantity of arable land and water availability for agriculture. So these are major concerns. And the second point is the whole element of production because of climate change, change in production. Because at times we produce certain crops and which we are used to, but then with climate change, we don't realize the rain is not going to come on time and etc. So there comes the element of adaptability and going to the resilience part of it. And then the third element of this is the whole concern of direct impact on livelihood, because of the climate change and changes in the rain, especially the rain-fed agriculture and livestock can be hugely affected.
Sir, 2 more minutes.
How many?
2 more minutes.
Oh my God, I didn't realize. So I will rush it further.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
the second thing I want to say going forward is the concern related related other elements, such as, you know, the climate change can cause concern of migration. It can have huge changes in the yield, etc., etc. And the third part is on the Asia region. Asia region and India, we have, like, you know, in the last decade or so, 700 million people have been affected by climate change factors. The World Bank estimates climate change could push 62 million people to extreme poverty by 2030. So with the concern in the region, also which applies to India, high reliance on climate-sensitive livestock and agriculture, high incidence of poverty and food insecure population, high population density of vulnerable and highly exposed to climate-related floods, cyclone, and droughts, and also long-term changes such as gradual change in monsoon pattern, the point you just mentioned about glacier melt and sea level. The region is extremely vulnerable to climate change. Now, going forward, in terms of solution, I would say climate change is there to stay. So therefore, we must go forward towards adapting to climate change and look at how do we, prepare for it, how do we develop an early warning system for it, and how do we respond. So India has some of these safety net programs like TPDS, midday meal program, ICDRs, Disposal Abhiyan, etc., are excellent example of safety net support to the vulnerable population. There is a need, of course, to go more into micronutrient diversification of food and etc. And the last point is the crucial element is the regional approach. I think regional approach gives a good added value in policy, in efficiency, and general practice. And it can be a great lesson to be learned going forward. So there is a merit in that. And to sum it up, I would say climate change has a major impact on food security and agriculture. Adaptation is important. Preparedness and early warning is important. And safety net and support to the population, which are most vulnerable, is a fundamental for the protection and taking it forward. A very last point I want to say is, today was Bill Gates issued a statement, his user letters, and he points out COVID, which has caused the panic on population death and loss of economy and etc. Climate change can have a multiple size and multiple level of impact. So therefore, although it is a slow issue and is slowly happening, therefore maybe some countries don't see it, or it is happening in some country and not others, but it is a serious issue for the policymaker, for agriculture scientists and planner to look at it and really factor in the context of development and agricultural promotion. So here is my last words. Thank you to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parajuli. It speaks extensively about your wide knowledge and various countries that you have served. You touched upon food security, malnutrition, and supply-demand linkages. change in production, etc., and also very recently and how the COVID has made even more difficult the already affected livelihoods. Thank you very much, and we will come back to you if there are any questions. Let me complete the panelist observations initially. May I call upon Professor Jayaraman. Jayaraman works with us at MSSRF, and he is currently working as senior fellow, and he mostly worked with Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and he has a wide range of experience, particularly addressing climate policy, emphasis on equity and justice, international climate policy and negotiations. He is part of the climate negotiation team for India in all the COP meetings. So we have a very good experience in various fields, and may I call upon Professor Jayaraman to speak about climate resilient agriculture in Tamil Nadu, some key challenges. Thank you.
I was almost going to do this lecture online from home, but the first opportunity to stand at a podium in 5 months was too good to pass up. So I decided I will turn up here, and instead of isolating, quarantining myself at home. So my special thanks to Mr. Parajuli for his remarks, because in these days when a lot of the climate discourse has shifted to the language of risk, to hear talk of vulnerability as the centerpiece, I think is very valuable. So thank you very much, sir, for joining us, and I hope my talk will supplement at least one or two dimensions of what you were talking about. So let me start right away with a couple of remarks about the policy context. In several levels of government and in the scientific community in agriculture, there is some misapprehension about what exactly is India's commitment to the Paris Accord in terms of emissions reduction and particularly in terms of agriculture. Now let me say very clearly that it is absolutely clear that India has made no commitment to reduction in emissions as such. It's only a reduction in emissions intensity of GDP that it has committed, and large-scale deployment of renewable energy. So especially those dealing with official policy should keep this into account. Second, India has made very clear that India's INDC, it said, now it is called the NDC, do not bind it to any sector-specific mitigation obligation or action, including in the agriculture sector. And this is stated up front. So India has always made it clear that agriculture is the arena of adaptation and not mitigation. And there are two references to natural resources. The first is, of course, partly mitigation in character, but it is to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent through forest and tree cover. And the other, specifically about agriculture, is simply about promoting adaptation by enhancing investments in development programs. So I think, especially in policy discussions, we should be very clear about this. Now you may ask, is this justified? One is, after all, government policy is one thing, but what do the facts on the ground tell us? And here is a bunch of numbers, and this is basically gigatons or billion tons of carbon dioxide. So India's agriculture contributes 1.224 billion tons, which is about 29.6% of India's total emissions. So you must also remember that India's total emissions annually are about 7% of the global total. So this is one figure. The second figure is that India's emissions from the agriculture and LULUCF sectors contribute 7.35% of the global total of this sector. So, which is of course 29.7% of total global emissions, again, without taking account of carbon dioxide removal by forests, etc. So, it should be borne in mind that India is not really a major emitter in that sense, especially if you look at the per capita basis of India's emissions in the agriculture and LULUCF sector. But there's more to be said, and is very often not at the center of our discussion, that significant sections of the poor in India and many developing countries depend on agriculture for livelihoods. Their engagement with agriculture suffers from instability of production, adverse impact of price shocks relating to both input and output, low incomes and low productivity. Inability to cope with weather and climate shock is the consequence and outcome of poverty, and it is quite clear in many instances that it is not the cause of poverty. The last point we must keep in mind is to this aspect of differentiation in our countryside. The world does not appear the same to the small farmer versus the large farmer. Large farmers do well, and this is reflected in positive indices of agricultural growth, input sales, and rising production and productivity. So, let us switch tracks to situating India's productivity problem in the global context. That is certainly one aspect of agriculture that we must keep note of. So, India's position in the world can be characterized simply as leading in area or production, lagging in productivity. Professor Ratanlal yesterday, very nicely made the point about the success of Green Revolution in positioning India as a major producer of many commodities, and rightly so. Its achievement of which his generation can be justly proud, led by, of course, our Professor Swaminathan. But if you look, for instance, at the table for rice, you will find that India is the first in acreage, the second in total production, but the fifth in terms of every decade. And you see the result here. The rainfall distribution in India is unlike the rest of the country, and very often, unfortunately, this is neglected. So even the Tamil Nadu State Action Plan, version 2.0 on climate change, has no analysis of the October, November, December season of rainfall in Tamil Nadu. So you see, that's the maximum month for the rainfall. Overall, we find that there is no statistically significant trend in both total and seasonal rainfall, not only for October, November, December, but also for June to September. We must not forget, of course, that like the rest of India, increasingly operational holdings are dominated by the presence of marginal, small and semi-medium cultivators. However, the ICAR has noted, and it's a very important point, that the climatic zone distribution in our state has shifted. So while Coimbatore has moved up with a higher moisture index from semi-arid to dry subhumid, and similarly the neighboring Nilgiris, but a number of districts, including those in the Tanjore, the Cauvery Delta, which my colleague Surjit will speak about shortly, have moved in fact from dry subhumid to semi-arid, and it's something like 20% of the total cultivated area has, total area of Tamil Nadu has shifted in its climatic classification. The yield gaps in agriculture in Tamil Nadu are relatively low compared to other states. In paddy, we have only about 25% in contrast to much higher levels elsewhere. The gap is significant in maize, but that is true of the entire country. And in pearl millet and sorghum, there is room for improvement. However, there are two very important aspects about trends in yield that we should note. One is the virtual stagnation in rice yield over 2 decades, followed by recent increase. And the other is the catch-up by millets and coarse cereals. And this is a very striking feature of Tamil Nadu, though of course a lot of this is driven actually by maize. And maize, of course, you know, there's open to what extent this is driven by human consumption or needs of feed, etc. The challenge of scale, however, remains. So I think very prominently the role of, there are a whole lot of new varieties of millets and coarse cereals available through agriculture research in our state. This is very important. Policy obviously has played a role. But nevertheless, if you look at it in terms of area, millets have and coarse cereals have to catch up. But this is, I think, a promising indicator in terms of climate change. But what is really striking, and I think I should draw your attention to in terms of climate resilience, is that if you take the proportion of irrigated area to the total area, this is a whopping 22 out of 30. So this is something like over 70%. Of course, you know, you can quarrel with the data. This is partial irrigation, etc., is all included. But this is a significant number. And as a result, what we see is that there is fairly low sensitivity directly to current climate variability in Tamil Nadu agriculture. But there is a complex seasonal pattern of cultivation in Tamil Nadu. There are as many as 6 seasons of paddy. So determining the trends without further data, our analysis is preliminary. So, you know, we should still need to have some further analysis. But what it attests to is, I think, a strong trend of what in the literature is called autonomous adaptation to current climate variability, backed by strong irrigation trend and varietal diversity. Though how to test it quantitatively remains a challenge. So I'm almost towards the end of my talk, Dr. Murli. So if you look at the actual results in terms of the direct impact of climate variability on rice, for instance, it's a bit hard to determine because season-wise production of paddy is hard to come by over a sufficiently long time period. We see quite gratifyingly that extreme temperatures above the cutoff point optimal temperature for rice does in fact lead to drop in yields. But the impact of the overall impact and the overall sensitivity to temperature trends and rainfall trends is somewhat minimal. And you have much clearer signals in other parts of the country. So where does this brief review take us? So one is, I wish to emphasize that in terms of climate resilient agriculture, we must pay attention in Tamil Nadu to the differences rather than the similarities with the usual story from the rest of the country. Yield gap closure, bridging of achievable yield remains, I think, fairly limited in scope because the gap is small. So what do we need? I think we need a strong technology. We need varietal development for abiotic and other stresses. And we really need to rethink the GM and related techniques debate in this context. Other measures such as soil health are very important, but I would like to introduce a word of caution here that they are not marked by high expenditure. They are marked by high expenditure, and while its co-benefits are significant environmentally, its costs are also significant, and the global database makes this very clear. Payment for ecosystem services is somewhat complicated, and it is a market mechanism, and its disequalizing character for the large number of smallholders is something we must bear in mind very clearly. Rationalizing input use to lower costs is important, but I wish to emphasize that we perhaps in Tamil Nadu must think of this primarily as an economic question rather than an agronomic or scientific issue. I would just like to emphasize a few final points. One, any new methodology of cultivation, I don't want to get trapped in the jargon of whether it is conservation, agriculture, or agroecology, etc. Anything that has negative impacts on yields will simply exacerbate our rural crisis. Second, agriculture remains the target of adaptation and not mitigation. The Tamil Nadu or Indian cultivator, for that matter, cannot yet be the target of implementing what are politely called global environmental values. Purely ecologically or environmentally driven, large-scale cropping pattern shifts by regulatory methods will provoke further crisis. I think there is a lot of work to be done in this area. We still have to understand the role of supply chains and value chains and the impact of climate. There are several sectors where Tamil Nadu has registered notable growth, perhaps not in the leading position compared to the rest of the country, but significant for Tamil Nadu. And how to protect and enhance their value addition remains an important challenge. So with these, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jayaraman, and it is quite intriguing about the analysis that you have made. And I think it has to sink in our minds as to how this can be taken for not only further analysis, but also further, practicality in terms of this can be done. And perhaps a more elaborate discussions are required. Yeah, that too at a greater level. Certainly they're very good inputs. So now let me move on to Dr. Ramasubramanian, and I understand Ramasubramanian and Dr. Velvizhi will be jointly presenting the climate change resilient, the topic on the ecosystem-based adaptation, the coastal ecosystems. Dr. Ramasubramanian is a doctorate from Center for Advanced Study in the University of Madras, and he has been working with the Swaminathan Foundation for almost 25 years almost, and at least I know him for the last 16, 17 years when I was working in Yanam, and he was working in Koringa, and he has done a lot of work that I know personally in Koringa, and he has developed genetic resources of mangroves, and he developed a lot of and also has developed in Andhra Pradesh the mangrove restoration. So there are lots of groundwork that he has done, as I know. And may I request Ramasubramanian, maybe you can take 10 minutes and leave 10 minutes to Velvizhi.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
Okay.
I will also introduce Velvizhi before you speak.
Yeah,
Velvizhi is our scientist and a practitioner at MSSRF, working at Fish for All Center in Pumpuhar. She has been again, like Ramasubramanian, very active at the local level and responding to the people's requirements rather than much more on science. So, and to her credit, she has bagged Ambedkar Award in 2010 as a, and also Spark Pancharatna Award in 2019 for popularizing and strengthening marine-based livelihoods for fishing communities. Yeah, please go ahead, maybe 10 minutes to each. I'll sound you just 2 minutes ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Ramasubramanian.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Fellow panelists, good afternoon to everybody. I'll be speaking on the ecosystem-based adaptation, mainly land-based ecosystems, and my colleague Dr. Velvizhi will be speaking on marine ecosystems. So, particular context to Tamil Nadu. So, if you see the coastal areas in Tamil Nadu, we have a coastal length of about 1,076 kilometers, in which more than 50% is sandy beach, and other rocky coast is about 5%, mud flats is about 38%. And we have a variety of coastal ecosystems which are highly productive, but they are ecologically sensitive. We have around 1,340 square kilometers of highly productive coastal ecosystems along our Tamil Nadu coast. So these ecosystem services have mainly helped the poor small artisanal fishers. They are all depending on the ecosystem. So more than 70 ecosystem services are being used by the local communities. So coming to climate change projections in Tamil Nadu, if you see the past trend analysis, the projections are made on several parameters. So temperature by the end of this 2100, the maximum temperature will rise by 1 to 3.1 degrees centigrade, and rainfall is erratic. The number of rainy days has come down, and there is a significant increase in the heavy precipitation days, so that the annual rainfall is almost same, but there are dry days, more dry days we are expecting. And the sea level rise, till now we were experiencing around 2 millimeters per year, but after 1993, the global mean sea level is about 3.3 millimeters. And coming to India, our North Indian Ocean region also is rising. Between 1974 and 2004, the rise was between 1.06 and 1.75 millimeter per year, but now it is almost with the same level of GMS. But coming to Tamil Nadu coast, by the end of this 2100, the sea level will be rising around 19 centimeters to 73 centimeters. The Cauvery Delta, which is a rice bowl of Tamil Nadu, will be highly vulnerable to sea level rise. So this is climate change projections. The number of cyclones along the east coast, including Tamil Nadu, may come down slightly, but if you see the intensity, it will be very high. Even the cyclones between 1981 and 2006 were analyzed. The number of severe cyclone is almost equal to Tamil Nadu and higher than Orissa and West Bengal in Tamil Nadu. So in Tamil Nadu, the northern districts are highly prone to disasters, particularly cyclone. So these are some of the climate change adaptation strategies envisaged by Tamil Nadu State Action Plan for Climate Change. So one of the strategies what they given is establishment of bioshields with the appropriate trees, so that multiple tree species to have a better impact to reduce the impact of these disasters, particularly erosion, sea level erosion and sea level rise. Then biodiversity conservation of coastal resources like seagrass beds, coral reefs to reduce the impact of climate change. And also these biodiversity hotspots will provide a lot of livelihood support. Then reclamation of saline soils to enhance the productivity of the agriculture field along the coast. So MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, we have been working for the last 30 years, conserving the coastal resources, especially mangroves. Through ecosystem-based adaptations, we are involving the local community to protect these resources so that the community will be getting benefited, and also they will be relieved from the impact of these climate change vulnerabilities. So we have three major programs. One is conservation management of mangroves, then integrated farming, and third one is biosaline agriculture. So globally, we have mangroves of about 18 million hectares, and these mangroves are potential sink for carbon dioxide. More than 218 teragrams of carbon per year is being sequestered by the mangroves globally. So in India, we are around 5,000 square kilometers of mangroves, in which Tamil Nadu has around 45 square kilometers. In the districts, we have Thiruvarur, because Muthupet is there in Thiruvarur, so we have around 12.85 square kilometers of mangroves there, but there is a lot of scope to increase the mangrove cover in Tamil Nadu, particularly in Nagapattinam, Ramasubramanian, and Thiruvarur districts. So we initiated mangrove conservation management activities in Tamil Nadu, and it has been upscaled to other states like Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, and Maharashtra through joint mangrove management approach, where the local community played a major role. It's a community-centric approach, and we have restored more than 2,500 hectares of degraded mangroves. Apart from restoration of degraded mangroves, large areas of newly formed mudflats and elevated areas are with now good mangrove cover. This may be due to sea level rise, also have some benefit to get mangroves in the elevated areas. However, in recent years, if you see the Tamil Nadu coast, particularly mangroves in Jayaraman and Muthupet face climate change vulnerability. So this is how the mangroves are being restored. So this is a land use and land cover map of Jayaraman mangroves. If you see 1988, the mangroves were around 400 hectares, but now if you see, it has been completely restored. More than 800 hectares of mangroves are there in Jayaraman. Coming to Muthupet, I already told the climate change vulnerabilities, because recently we had a cyclone in Muthupet where a lot of mangroves were lost. 2019 FSR Forest Survey of India has given more than 4 square kilometers of mangroves were lost in Thiruvarur and Nagapattinam district. So these are some of the impacts of climate sea level rise on mangroves. Even though mangroves have the ability to cope up with the sea level rise due to sedimentation brought by the rivers, but if sediment flow is reduced, definitely these mangroves could not be withstand the sea level rise, and there is submergence, and there will be loss of species diversity, loss of species, as well as degradation of mangroves. So integrated mangrove fishery farming system, where the traditional aquaculture pond we have converted into integrated farm, where mangroves and aquaculture are done together. And this is a tidal fed pond where tidal water exchange bring water as well as nutrients to the cultured species. So we established IMFS ponds in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, and Blue Solutions considered IMFS as one of the potential adaptation for
Ramasubramanian, another 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then there is a scope for replication in other states also. So this is the integrated fish farming system we have done in Tamil Nadu, particularly in Nagapattinam and Karaikal areas. And this is a farming system where fishery, agriculture, and livestock are integrated together to get more income from the farm, actually. And it also provides household food security. Apart from that, the income is also round through the year. So recently we have initiated cage culture in the backwaters of Krishna, and there is a scope for doing in Ramanathapuram coast also. This is a biosaline agriculture. Tamil Nadu has around 15,000 hectares of saline soils along the coast. In most of the areas, saline tolerant traditional variety is being cultivated. We have also done a pilot study of cultivating halophytes in the saline soils. We have identified more than 29 halophyte species along the Tamil Nadu and Andhra coast that can be grown in the saline soils using saline water. Traditionally, the local community along the coast use Sveda and Sesapium as a green leaf vegetable. We have demonstrated around 7 halophyte species cultivation in the Tamil Nadu and Andhra coast. So, ecosystem-based conservation and management of coastal resources is very important to reduce the climate change vulnerability, because most of these artisanal fishermen and poor communities are depending on the resources. And climate change adaptation measures like integrated aquaculture, biosaline agriculture, and coastal biodiversity conservation are very important strategies to cope the impact of climate change. Thank you very much.
Ramasubramanian, and it's quite nice that how practically you have taken up along the farmers so many activities that are directly impacting them. Thank you so much. May I request Dr. Velvizhi?
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon to all. My presentation is focusing on ecosystem-based adaptation.
Speak up. I think you have to come closer to the mic, Velvizhi.
Yeah. So I'm focusing on marine fisheries and coastal livelihoods. So this is the fishing profile of Tamil Nadu state. It is a lengthy coastal line, and we have around 576 marine fishing villages in the state, spreading across 13 coastal districts. The active fisher folk of the state is around 8 lakhs. We have around 407 notified landing centers across the state. So the Tamil Nadu state across coastal stretch has many ecologically sensitive coastal and marine areas, including Muthupet Lagoon, Park Bay, Gulf of Mannar, etc. Here the fishing is carried out by using multiple craft and gears like prawn nets, bag net, seines, hook and line, etc. So the Tamil Nadu state is one of the top fish producing state in the country. As per the 2019 data, it has produced 7.75 lakhs ton of marine fish products. So yearly exported around 88,000 metric ton of marine products from the state. The state earned the foreign exchange of rupees 4,000 crores every year. So this is coming to the climate change. Actually, the ocean plays a critical role in Earth climate, and it's absorbing more than 90% of the heat and 25% of the CO2 from the atmosphere. This affects triple threat for the ocean. The ocean becomes more warmer and leads to less oxygen level, then more acidic in nature, which resulted in sea level rising, then bleaching of corals, and outbreak of toxic algal blooms, habitat loss, then acidification of the water, which harms to animals that build shells, and it also affects the livelihoods of the coastal fishing communities. Then again, the physiological functions of fish like growth, reproduction, spawning, breeding are directly influenced by change of temperature. For example, the oil sardine fishery. Earlier, the oil sardine fishery only restricted with the Malabar coast. But now, this oil sardine fishery is one of the dominant fish resources of the entire coastal states of India, predominantly in north and east coast of India. The study says that the seasonal variation of sea surface temperature positively correlate with the availability of the oil sardine fisheries. So likewise, the mackerel fishes. The mackerel is a pelagic fish resources. Due to the changes in the sea surface temperature, the mackerel fish move towards the subsurface water. So this kind of changes are unable to predict by our local fishermen, so it affects their livelihood. So these are some of the potential, some of the impacts of climate change in fisheries and potential adaptive measures. But to minimize the impact of climate change, a balanced approach is needed, which brings value to the ecosystem and also ecosystem services to the people who depends on the resources for their livelihood. So actually this figure, an important thing we understood that many elements in an ecosystem are interconnected with each other. Something affect one part of the ecosystem can also have a flow-on effects on another parts. For example, the decreasing fisheries in the middle of this diagram results in declining human well-being in the coastal population that causes increased habitat destruction and increased sedimentation and lost seagrass, seaweed beds, this resulting in decreased fishes. So the ecosystem-based approach, it is an integrated approach. It allows adaptive management leading to more effective and inclusive planning. It also facilitates increased stakeholder participation. It is very, very important. More transparent planning and decision making because of the stakeholder participation. It also recognizes cultural and traditional values of the people, those who are depending on the ecosystem. It protects the fishing sector from the impacts of other sector and vice versa. Since the inclusive planning is happen, it promotes the gender equality in planning, implementation, and the distribution of the services. So it overall increases the resilience of the fishing communities towards the climate change. So the fisheries management through ecosystem approach adaptation brings sustainable development. It is finding a balance between ecological well-being and the human well-being through good governance for future generations. The ecological well-being means achieving maximum ecosystem services, including supporting and regulatory services. And the human well-being, it is overall well-being of the people, those who are depends on the ecosystem. So these two things are managed by using a set of processes and also the compliance enforcement. So it is a holistic approach in the ecosystem-based management. The next few slides, I am highlighting the works carried out by MSSRF focusing on ecosystem-based adaptation and building the resilience of the coastal communities. This is the artificial reefs for marine biodiversity.
2 more minutes, Velvizhi.
The corals are, as you all aware of that, the corals are extremely diverse and vulnerable ecosystem, provide habitat for thousands of marine species in the oceans. However, due to over-exploitation, land use changes, and the anthropogenic activities, the coral reefs are degraded and are degraded. So one of the alternative solution to build the habitat, the artificial reef building. It provides a living, hiding, breeding places for the marine organisms. It also acts as a barrier to reduce the height of the waves and speed of the currents. It protects eroding coast and coastal settlement. So it gives more surface to the marine animals. Actually, MSSRF deployed this artificial reef in the selected districts of Tamil Nadu in collaboration with the Fisheries Department and NABARD. It gives 10 times more yield than the normal areas. Actually, in particular, the management of artificial reef is not species specific, but effective for all the organisms in the ecosystem. It allows to move from a single species framework to the ecosystem-based fishery management in the region. So the MSSRF also having the training center in Boombahar, it facilitates giving number of training to the fisher folks on the building capacity on sea safety, engine mechanism, more importantly the responsible fisheries, use of bycatch reduction, etc. This yielded very good results and developed positive attitude among the younger generations on ecosystem based conservation and management. And this is the ocean observer system actually for generating the real-time data, for alerting the community on the potential effect of the climate change. We need such kind of observational system. So we deployed this wave rider and current buoys in the coast of Tamil Nadu in collaboration with INCOIS. Based on this data, we are in a position to give the real-time advisory to the community on regular basis. And this is another important aspect actually from the climate change. Most vulnerable group is the small scale fishes. They are the more dependent on traditional knowledge. These people are need value added information on ocean conditions. The Fisher Friend, it is an Android-based application developed by MSSRF in collaboration with Qualcomm and INCOIS. It provides 3 types of services to the fishing community on early warning, livelihood, risk reduction services. So it enhances the adaptive capacity of small-scale fishes and reduce their risk and increase the economic benefit. Then this is the post-harvest, strengthening the post-harvest value chain. Actually, the lack of infrastructure facility in the landing center and poor fish handling practices leads to post-harvest loss. So which reduce the income of the fishers. To strengthen the post-harvest value chain, a community-based fish processing unit set up in Bhumgar, which facilitates the fishermen and women to storage their fish products during a distress sale. It also provides infrastructure facility for processing, drying and packaging. It facilitates marketing and linkage services with big traders. It helps women and men to avoid distress sale and also facilitate to connect with suitable markets for getting better price for their catch. So finally, I'm coming into the conclusion part. The threats and issues to sustainable fisheries are broad and need an integrated approach. The ecosystem-based adaptation helps to identify major issues to be addressed, and it also facilitates integrated management across land, water, living resources to reduce the climate change effects. Most importantly, the ecosystem-based adaptation, balancing ecological well-being with human well-being through good governance. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think there is a lot of appreciation from various people who are watching about your the quality of slides and the information that is contained in the slides. It's excellent, Velvizhi. And let me move on to the presentation by V. Surjit. Dr. Surjit is Associate Professor working at Center for Agrarian Studies, National Institute for Rural Development and Panchayat Raj, Hyderabad. And he has been working on the agrarian studies on and impact assessment for over 15 years. And he has worked on international International Potato Research Institute, CIP, and also ICRISAT. May I request Dr. Surjit to go ahead.
Well, thank you, Dr. Murali. Am I audible?
You are very much audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and you can see my screen, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So let me thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to participate in this consultation. At the same time, pay our respect to Professor Ramasubramanian, who is a source of inspiration for any student in agriculture. Since the time is very limited, I would like to focus on 4 major issues with respect to...
Could you please share your presentation? Presentation is not visible.
Okay, let me...
I know you asked whether it was, actually we misunderstood. You have to click share screen. Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I would focus my presentations. In fact, earlier presentations by Professor Jayaraman and Dr. Ramasubramanian and Velvizhi gave a glimpse of the macro level issues, at the same time about some micro level solutions to some of these concerns. So I would focus my presentation largely on the strategies or the implications or the challenges which we have to face with respect to specific agriculture production conditions in Cauvery Delta, particularly in the context of introduction of the protected special agriculture zone, which was introduced in very recent, a few months back in February 2020. If you look at the Cauvery Delta, by Cauvery Delta, I refer to the old undivided, it largely aligns with the old undivided Tanjavur district, which is comprises of the present Tanjavur, Tiruvarur, and Nagapattinam districts. So I mean, it has a huge, long history of agriculture prosperity. It houses one of the oldest irrigation system in India, dating back to the 2nd century AD during the Chola period. The Grand Anaikot and the subsequent irrigation systems developed by Sir Arthur Cotton later in the Delta. And it is also has been a focus of very remarkable agriculture development program, starting from the Grow More Food campaign in the 1940s, the intensive agriculture area program in the 60s, and the high yielding variety program, which later evolved as the Green Revolution programs. So it has been, the region has been a focus of, has received a considerable policy attention from the point of view of agriculture development. And because of the rice production system, it has been called as the rice bowl of South India. So moving from that, the region has been known for agricultural prosperity. We should also look at the situation of the Delta now. Hello? Yeah, I would like to flag 4 major issues. The first issue is with respect to the levels of water availability in the Delta region now. So the graph shows the irrigation water which is discharged from the Grand Anaikot during the last 50 years, from 1950 to 2000. So all of us know that the final verdict of the Cauvery Tribunal allocates around 404 TMC feet of the Cauvery irrigation water. But if you look at last 50 years of data, there has been a discharge of that much quantity of irrigation water from the Grand Anaikot. The highest, which was in 1954-55, was around 359 TMC feet. And if you look along the time period, there has been a consistently declining availability of irrigation water from the Grand Anaikot, which is largely available to support the irrigation system in the entire Delta. If you look at little carefully, if you look at the decadal average of discharge from this Grand Anaikot, again you can see a very consistent decline, and it is declining to very dramatic levels. From in the 1950s, the average was around 301 TMC feet. Now it comes to in between 100 to 200 TMC feet, which has implications for the agriculture production systems in the region. So that is issue number 2. This shows the state disaster management plan prepared by the state government, which assess the impact of wind and cyclone hazard zones within the state, and it categorizes the entire Delta as a high damage risk zone. So on the one side, you have issues with respect to availability of irrigation water, and on the other side, you have issues with respect to natural disasters. So that is point number 2. And with respect to natural disasters, if you look at the information from 2000 onwards, for the last 14 years, almost half of the period has been, the production system in the Delta has been impacted by either drought or floods or excessive rains, starting from tsunami in 2004 to Cyclone Gaja 2 years back. So if you take last 14, 15 years, half of these years have been impacted. The production system have been
Sir,
impacted.
another 2 minutes.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Natural calamities or disasters. So how does these correlate with the productivity and profitability issues of rice production systems in the Delta? If you look at the average yield or the district level average yield for the last 14 years, the cost of cultivation, the cost A2, which is the actual paid out cost, the farmers have to pay from his pocket or roughly aligns with the variable cost. The cost A2 estimated, the 5-year average is around 18,400 rupees per hectare. And to realize, to meet at least that cost, they need to realize an yield of 3.4 tons per hectare, given the procurement prices prevailing at that time. So if you look at the data from 2000 to 2012, last 13 years data, only 3 or 4 years have the yield data in the Delta were able to cross that break-even point. So in all other years, the levels of profitability have been impacted, which will affect the lives and livelihood of the farmers there. So you have issues with productivity and profitability there, in the background of the natural disasters which exist. So this shows the flow of Cauvery in the entire Delta. The blue line shows the flow of Cauvery. This is the Delta region, and this is various branches of Cauvery which branches out from the Grand Anakat, and through a network of canals, it irrigates the entire Delta. If you look at the entire Delta, it's not, there is large amount of heterogeneity in the entire Delta. I would like to invite your attention to a work by Marshall Bouton, which was done in 1980. He has divided this entire Delta region into 5 different zones based on the type of irrigation, quality of irrigation, soil characteristics, agrarian density, and the mode of production. So he has combined social variables, socioeconomic variables, and agronomic variables, and made this classification of the entire Delta region to bring about the heterogeneity in the entire Delta. Like Professor Jayaraman was mentioning earlier, we should focus more on the differences than the similarities to be focused. If we want to develop a strategy towards addressing the issues related to agriculture production system in the Delta, we should be focusing our attention to these differences, these divergences within the Delta. So all the policies and programs which have to be designed in the context of this protected agriculture zone has to take into account these variabilities between the Delta regions. So the whole analysis brings two important aspects when we talk about the agriculture production systems in the Delta. The first one is, water stress related issues will remain the most important issue to be addressed. Any technology, any program has to take into account sustainable water management strategies as its core component. And the very introduction of this Protected Agriculture Zone, Protected Special Agriculture Zone Act will shift the focus from non-agriculture back to agriculture, because there will have constraints in taking up a lot of non-agricultural activities. So the entire responsibility of creating livelihoods, employment will rest on the agriculture sector, so that the welfare of the people is not affected. So an integration of the crop sector, animal husbandry, fishery, and an integration of all these 3 sectors will have to take up the larger responsibility of bringing livelihoods and employment generation in the Delta. And we should also focus on developing micro, small, and medium enterprises with this integration, which integrates crop, animal husbandry, and fishery sector, so that the lives and livelihoods of the people in the Delta is not affected, and it can sustain livelihoods and result in sustainable development. Well, I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. May I request Ms. Sonam Dombre to make her presentation. Sonam is an alumnus of State Bank of India Youth for India Fellowship batch 2014-2015, and she took interest working on applied progress that contribute to development of space and scientific aptitude and design thinking. She works with the salt workers mostly in and it's also not only she works with salt workers, she also works with CSR portfolios with predominant focus on water source development. She works currently with his Indus Bank in Mumbai. Ms. Sonam Dombre, please go ahead. So I understand there are some technical issues with Ms. Sonam regarding presentation. So until then, perhaps we can take a couple of questions. And what I see is there are many questions are getting answered right away, which is good, saves our time. There is a question from Subhash, ICAR. This is a question to, I think, Mr. BishowParajuli. Good talk and covered all points relevant to India. My point here is we need to do quantity, the integrated climate change, both short and long term impact on agriculture productivity at the household level, district or agroecological zones, 127 zones over India. This is very much needed rather than country level or state level. I think it's only a suggestion. Do you want to pass, Mr. Parajuli?
I can say a little bit about it.
Go ahead for a minute.
In fact, thank you for that question and suggestion. World Food Program has done these work in number of countries. In fact, now we have started in response to the COVID in Odisha. We are working with the state government of Odisha in looking into the impact of COVID at the household level. So definitely in certain other areas where there are relevant element of implication of climate change, be it weather pattern or be it from a flood or a drought, we can certainly partner and work on it to measure it and work with Swaminathan Foundation and others specifically at the local level. Good suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other question is your emphasis on regional approach to address climate change issue is very much needed. What needs to be done to accelerate this process? Again to Mr. Parajuli.
I didn't have much time to talk about it, unfortunately, in my presentation. I sort of rushed through, but absolutely, we are very much encouraging regional approach because climate is beyond politics. So the effects of climate happens across border, across countries. So therefore, there's so much learning can be done in terms of the modality of application, and then issue of understanding, the element of measurement of vulnerability, response, the resilience approach, adaptation approach, early warning, and etc. And in fact, we are looking concretely to tell you some work in the weather in this area, in this particular regional, in the south, linking to Sri Lanka, there is one. And another one, we are also looking at it in 3-4 countries in the region. For example, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. We're looking into that as well. So from a climate point of view, adaptation point of view, and lesson learning, and etc. There are multiple benefits of it, but there is a need for a will and commitment and someone to take a lead and move forward. And a number of these type of work being done by World Food Program in Southern Africa region and West Africa, like Sahel, is a great example. It can bring a whole package of elements, from responses to element of nutritional intervention to crop to livestock. I didn't talk in my conversation about the climate effect on fishery and etc., which many other colleagues very beautifully explained. So there is so much can be learned, and in fact, what we are encouraging WFP is an element of South-South cooperation in the context of this. And there is a special initiative we are taking here in the World Food Program Delhi office on that from a multiple angle. But this new dimension in terms of early warning, adaptation, climate change can also be a good component. We hadn't thought about that, but we're going to be increasingly pushing on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now Sonam is online. May I request Sonam Dumbre to make a presentation, please?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Really sorry for the technical glitch.
You are audible. Please go ahead. You have a presentation to make?
Yes,
then
sir.
you please share it.
Putting up the presentation.
Okay. Please share it on your screen.
So is the slide visible?
No, Farhan. Sonam, you put F5, I guess. Sonam, can I ask our people to
Yes.
do PPT?
Yeah, sir, is the PPT visible now?
No.
Okay.
Sonam,
Yes.
we are unable to see your slides.
Yeah, now it
Please
is
go
fine.
ahead.
It has come.
Okay, now it has come. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, now it is visible. Please go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm talking in my capacity of my association with MSSRF with a rural development fellowship that happened in 2014-15. And today I'm talking on the living standards of salt pan workers, which is not a very talked about topic generally. So with specificity to Tamil Nadu, salt. Tamil Nadu is the second largest producer of salt in this country, with Thoothukudi and Nagapattinam being the major districts for salt production. For the audience who don't have much information on how salt is made, it's basically it's a seasonal work, and it starts between 2 cycles of monsoon in a year. So first land preparations are done where hundreds of acres of land masses are being the bunding, the canals, water canals, and the beds are being tapped with hand and wooden rakes. And such hundreds of acres are prepared for salt work, where brine can be extracted and put in series, and salt is crystallized. It is scraped with a wooden rake, and after that it is carried over a distance, and it is collected over heaps. This is collected by traders or industries by trucks, or if it is an audible salt, edible salt, it is packaged and then transported. So a little bit on the quality of life, of salt pan workers, on how it is. Basically, on the four aspects on the socio-economics, there is a distinct peculiarity on the kind of community that is involved in, and this is something that is standard all over the country. I mean, either they are scheduled caste communities or other backward communities like scheduled tribes and others. Typically, the locations of their households are in secluded hamlets. Literacy is very poor in such area. Because of the odd working hours, even the next generation is sort of facing a lot of rampant school dropout. There is very less awareness on their general entitlements as a salt worker, but as a citizen in general. And there is a rampant abuse of alcohol, majorly, and substance abuse like tobacco. Because of the seasonality, the nature of seasonality of the work, there is a lot of insecurity in the employment. The salt work is considered a little undignified by the general community. The wage work typically ranges from 150 to 200 days, and the wage also sort of fluctuates because the rate of the salt depends on the demand and supply. Monsoon is a bane. Like one day of monsoon, one day of unseasonal monsoon can halt the salt work for a week or probably more than that. Salt workers are also in a vicious debt cycle where their expenses are sometimes more than their earnings, and they tend to take loans from their trader or where the landowner or informal lenders, and they tend to work for the same guy as a laborer, so they are in a debt cycle that way. Salt worker laborers don't really have any influence on the salt value chain. Now there are two other things about if we look at the occupational health hazard side of it. The working environment of a salt pan is very, I would say, inhuman, because there is salt like everywhere. Because the salt is collected in heaps and hillocks over there, and the wind is very harsh and very speedily, the air contains micron level salt crystals, which salt workers tend to breathe all the time, or it enters their eyes or settles on their skin. Soil is obviously hypersaline. The water in which they have to continuously work in is 10 to 15 times more concentrated than the sea water. The temperatures are very high. I mean, I had carried a thermometer once and it hit more than 40 degrees Celsius. These are continuous stretches of land masses, so no shade at all anywhere. It is a very potential health hazard. The work is very laborious. Their nutrition levels are not very good because of their dietary lifestyles. The atmosphere is very corrosive. That is why you will observe in my next slide on their health. If you look at the kind of health issues that a salt worker has, it's pretty much covering them from their head to toe. The skin, the eye, and the respiratory organs are the most affected. If you look at, it's not just the external effect, it's also an internal damage that is caused specifically to some have thyroid malfunctions. Kidney failure is also kidney failure or kidney stone is also seen. Skin diseases are a lot. I mean, it's very common. I have never seen a salt worker who is healthy, and there is no salt worker who does not have a wound or a keratinized palm or has fissured heels, because they almost work with bare feet and hand. And the only aid that they have while working is a pair of slippers and a wooden rake. That is all. In one of my interactions with few doctors while I was there was a very basic thing that got highlighted in that interaction is dehydration. They have a practice of using Lifebuoy soap while taking bath, is what the doctor said, which even makes their skin further dry. And to add to it, salt workers generally do not drink water while they are at work. First of all, their working hours are very odd. They, to avoid the heat of the sun, they would start their work somewhere around the dawn. But I have also seen them practicing the work towards the afternoon, because they can't walk for long distances and there are no shades and toilets and urinals. They will tend to avoid drinking water at all, or hold their urine for a long period of time, making them susceptible to urinary tract infections and others. But why are there no toilets in salt pans? I mean, can we provide them toilets and encourage them to replenish the bodily fluids that they lack? Uh, there were few challenges in why a toilet can't be built there. The atmosphere is very harsh. It's very windy, gusty winds blow from there, and any kind of ordinary structure can't withstand such kind of atmosphere. The salt pans are considered sacred by salt workers, and they would not encourage any kind of waste creating structure over there. Traders also discourage to building of any such structures in the salt pans. Also, the groundwater table is very high and there is flooding in the monsoon, so any kind of structural intervention is a huge challenge in salt pan work, in salt pans. As an attempt to address this issue, one urinal was designed as a part of the fellowship project, and it looked somewhat like this. The major thing that has to be done in the project, major thing that had to be taken care of was to make the structure in such a way that it doesn't contaminate the salt, so that there are no agitations from the traders or the salt pan workers. So it is a very simple model where a cylindrical urinal cabinet was designed, which will reduce the friction of the wind and will stay for a longer period of time. Whatever urine and water wash that used to come after each use was passed to a concrete lined bed filled with soil, and we had planted Sesbania and Sesuvium as salt and urea absorbing plants in those beds, so that the effluents get stabilized over there. So this was installed as a pilot with my association with MS Swaminathan's Research Foundation, and this was done in one of the villages in Vedaranyam. Uh, I wouldn't say that it's a success story, but this is one of the starts that we can do. What needs to be done going ahead for the salt pan worker? There is no one intervention, or there is no one area where we need to gain attention to. There are some micro and macro level interventions that need to be done. Salt pan work is highly rigorous. It is, in fact, in some countries, prisoners are sent for salt pan work because of its extremely inhuman environment and its extremely hazardous nature to the human health. But in order to make them resilient to that atmosphere, they need to have a specialized nutritional intervention, something that is not very exotic, but something that can be something that they can grow in their backyard and they can follow. But there has to be a expert guidance on what needs to be consumed and what not. There has to be a rigorous rehydration in some ways where they can drink more and more water and withstand the temperature. We need to build alternative livelihood capacities, because they are completely secluded. There is very less knowledge on what can be done apart from salt work, because when I was there, I landed in Vedaranyam in September, and I had not seen a functional salt pan till March, because there were unseasonal rainfall. So no, there is the more monsoon, the more climate change effect on the unseasonal rains, salt work gets affected. We need to leverage on existing entitlements. I mean, if you go and see the website of salt department, they have a lot of welfare schemes, for the children of salt workers, for building toilets, for building sheds for them. But very less has been, acted upon. At macro level, there has to be an awareness dialogue amongst general public, because very less has been known about salt work and the hazardous nature of it. And probably that is the reason why, unless you have more dialogue happening around it, you will have no solutions to it, or no kind of stimulus amongst people. There has to be an inclusion and participation of salt workers on their relevant platforms. For that matter, there are very less institutionalization of the salt workers. There are only SAGs in which women are involved, which are not very functional, I guess. But yes, institutionalization or something like a structure of a cooperative that can be formed. Very less statutory measures are being followed, and probably that is the reason why audits or monitoring or any kind of control from the salt department, because salt is a central subject, something from the top has to come, where basic human and labor right standards can be looked upon. Lastly, the current way of production of salt is highly manual. I mean, probably it is the same way. It has been followed for decades in the same way. Any kind of automation or mechanization can be explored in this sector, and this is something that is very long term and can be explored further. So that was the last bit from me as a way forward. My small experience with the salt workers while with MSSRF. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Sonam. It is quite an eye-opener. I had not seen this salt pan working conditions, and I think we should have kept your presentation when there was some political person was here on this stage. So, because there is no time and we have already overshot time, and since we don't have any other immediate sessions to go, I'll take one question each to each of the presenter, and we have already done with Mr. Parajuli, so I don't think I'll ask him any question. If you have picked up any question that you feel is most important, please go ahead and answer that question, or if you want to consolidate it, all the questions and answer, that is also fine. Have you picked up your questions? Ramasubramanian, Velvizhi? If you have picked up, then I will give you 1 minute each. So now, Jayaraman. I'll give 1 minute to Jayaraman, and then Ramasubramanian, and then Velvizhi, and it follows, and Surjit, and then Sonam. In that order, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the questions. I think taking all the questions into account, especially the one about the person was talking about techniques for growing submerged rice, etc. Taking all those into account, one thing I would like to do here, and now that our director is also here, is to build afresh a coalition for science in agriculture. This is our mandate in MSSRF. I think we must rededicate ourselves to this mandate. We have learned a lot in the process, but I think this is very important, and I would certainly be keen to pursue it. Those of you who are hearing this and would like to get in touch, do get in touch with me. We'll take this forward. We must have a coalition for science, for agriculture of the future. The second is the question of soil, which I want to respond to. It is complex and currently expensive. And in order to make a viable intervention, we need both. We need a suite of a collection of practices, and it has to be backed by good science and technology, but it has to be keeping into account economic value, value addition, returns, incomes, and it must, part of that obviously, we need ways to reduce costs. So, effective intervention in soil management. Otherwise, farmers would have done it themselves, and we would not even perhaps be discussing it at such length. So, I think that is what it will take for, I think, a very important component of what we need to do. So, I'll stop with these two observations. Thank you. Ramasubramanian, would you like to follow?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Actually, I had some two questions. One is suggestion from Dr. Vishankar. Interventions have great potential for replication. Further work for policy interventions to replicate in similar social and geographical conditions is suggested. Your suggestion is well taken, and we'll try to intervene policy level changes, as well as we'll also do other replication in similar coastal zones of other states. The other question is from Dr. Gopalakrishnan. Due to climate change, will we lose mudflat ecosystem, which is supposed to be another important ecosystem as like that of mangroves? Yes, true. Mudflats also have a lot of ecosystem services, so there is a possibility of getting inundation due to sea level rise as well as erosion. So there is a possibility of losing some of the potential mudflats due to sea level rise as well as erosion. So, but there is a process, sedimentation and other process. If sediment flow through rivers is coming good, definitely these mudflats also slowly will be getting filled up. There will be a vertical elevation of the mudflat to compact the sea level rise. These are the two questions I had. Thank you.
What happened? So is Velvizhi online? She is not online. So next, Dr. Surjit, can you please pick up some questions?
Yeah, so I think there were two questions specifically addressed to me. One was from Gobi on...
please speak up, sir. I think you need to come closer to the mic.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so one question from Gobi, basically asking for which needs huge public investment in the delta if you want to protect the delta. I completely agree with you, Gobi. The issue is when I said there has been, half of the years have been affected by droughts or floods or whatever. So in 2003, when I was doing some field surveys there, it was a bad year, and then all the farmers want to move away from agriculture because they said they can't make a livelihood from that. So from that, 15 years down the lane, when there was a legal legislation to protect the agricultural lands of the delta, the onus is again back to agriculture to provide livelihoods and employment. And that can happen only through science-based interventions. All the technologies, an integration of crop, animal husbandry, and fisheries technology, taking into account the differences than the similarities of various regions in the delta, and building a sustainable and inclusive value chains. And it can happen only through strong public investment, through research and development, and technology transfer mechanism. So I completely agree with you. Huge amount of public investment have to be there to protect the delta. And the second comment on Anil Kumar on increasing the catchment area with support from the 3 states. Yeah, I completely agree with you, but then that has to be dealt more scientifically than as an emotional issue. So I think in the long run, in a longer perspective, that aspect need to be looked at. with the collaboration, scientific collaboration between states to look at more sustainable solutions to maintain the, to maintain the delta, as well as to support the lives and livelihoods. The key point is agriculture becomes the focal point to provide livelihoods and employment. The shift is from non-agriculture to agriculture. It's not that non-agricultural activities are going to be stopped, but then the larger responsibility is on the agricultural land. So I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Surjit. And to Sonam, I don't think you have any questions, but there are only appreciations, and because many people have talked about it. The only suggestions they have, farming system would be restructured to suit women farmers. That's one suggestion. And a devoted workshop to this is needed with the active participation of salt workers, traders and consumers. I think these are only suggestions. I think we should take it up sometime later. And I thank all of... Yeah, just a minute. Yeah. Come here.
Thank you, Dr. Murali. This is regarding, in addition to what Dr. Sonam Dumbre presented about the salt pan workers, during 26th June 2014, Foundation held a consultative meeting on health of Vedaranyam salt workers, where we involved all the stakeholders and we gave the action plan to the government of Tamil Nadu to immediately take it up. And from the labor department also, people participated, and some of the recommendation given by us was also taken as a key, point, and they started working on it. We can follow it up and further to see how the implementation is going on, where if it is required, we can also add some more, interventions and so on. Thank you. This is what an add-on point to Dr. Sonam Dumbre's presentation.
Thank you so much. I think it has been a enlightening panel that we have had, various issues including the less or neglected issues on salt workers. So I thank all the panelists, particularly on their very vivid ways of explaining things to, and particularly the marine coastal systems and also the agriculture productivity issues that were brought in. And I thank you again, and I thank you all the people who are watching live and provided questions that were quite insightful. Thank you so much. And we will be assembling at 4 o'clock? Yeah, 4. We will be assembling again at 4 o'clock for another session. Thank you all, and see you again at 4 in the evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.